sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
It's Rabbi Sherman, Rabbi on the Sidelines, where we speak about the intersection of sports and faith. This morning we are joined live with Coach Phil Martelli, Associate Head Coach of the University of Michigan, 34 years at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, 6 Atlantic 10 titles, 3 Atlantic 10 championships, an Elite 8 in 2004 where his team went 27-0, the 2004 National Coach of the Year, live from Philadelphia in his hometown, Coach Phil Martelli. Coach, it's so great to have you.
Oh, thanks, Rabbi. This has been really on my calendar and a highlight of my calendar since our dear friend Alan Fogel reached out. And then when you're talking about Andy Katz and Dan Schulman and Seth Greenberg and Jim Boeheim, I'd like to interview you to pick out what you picked out from all those different guys.
Actually, it's been really amazing because the questions that we talk about in the conversation, actually a couple of weeks ago, Coach Matt Doherty had amazing things to say about his new book, Rebound from Pain to Passion. It's not about what we do on the court, but rather it's about what happens on the court reflects what we do off the court to make the world that we live in a little better place. And I know you do so much of that, especially Coaches versus Cancer. So I want to start first in your journey in Philly. I know you're back home in Philly. Obviously in Michigan the last couple of years, but you were born and bred there, went to school there, played basketball, Widener, assistant coach at St. Joe's, head coach at St. Joe's. When did you realize that basketball in Philly was something that you wanted to pursue and was going to be a lifetime dream of yours?
Well, the Philadelphia piece of that is that when I grew up in a row home in Southwest Philadelphia. And when you grew up in that row home, you had 2 identifying features. And one was, where did you go to school? Mm-hmm. And the second thing was, what playground, when it was safer to hang around at playgrounds than unfortunately it is now. So I would say to people, I went to St. Barnabas grade school and Finnegan playground. And that's the way you always identified yourself throughout Philadelphia. So my family moved to Delaware County, right outside of Philadelphia. And I was, to be honest with you, I was a playground rat. When it was baseball, I played baseball. When it was football, I played football. And we didn't really know in our group, like the 5th and 6th and 7th grade, we didn't know you had to sneak into a gym to play basketball. We waited until the rec center had a gym available, and that's how I played until the 6th grade. And then when I moved to Delaware County, what you just said about the game and what it gives to us, and then what we're responsible to give to others, it resonated with me. I met 3 guys. One was a postman, John Steele. One was a local politician, Pete O'Keefe. And the other guy, Tom Gallagher, worked at a bank. And they were the grade school coaches. And we were fortunate enough to have a gym, and we had good players, and we practiced a lot, and we played basketball a lot. And I got bit by this game probably at the age of 12. And I thought the magic in the game was you could take all of these diverse young guys, and they could pursue a common goal. The other thing, Rabbi, that came up to me was, well, when you got good at your playground, you went somewhere else to find out, well, what were those guys like? Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, it really was socialization. Mm-hmm. I believe that basketball is the greatest social experiment because it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. Doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Catholic. Doesn't matter if you're in LA or media. Doesn't matter if you're male or female. If you can pass, dribble, shoot, share the ball, and compete, you can play this game 3-on-3. You can play 5-on-5. You can play in the Forum. You can play in the Staples Center. You can play in the Palestra. But the game, the beauty of the game is that it did not discriminate. Didn't matter. And I got that at this age, and I thought, well, I'm not going to be good enough to play at the highest level, but if I can study this game and I can impact one person because of my coaching, then man, I feel good about that.
So take us through Philadelphia and the Big Five. For those, I know there's a lot of Philadelphia audience watching. There's actually lots of Michigan people out here in LA that love what you're doing there. And there's lots of Philly people as well, including my own family. The Big Five: Nova, LaSalle, St. Joe's, Penn, Temple. Take us through that aspect in terms of what you just said and building those relationships. I mean, your best friends were Fran Dunphy from Penn, then Temple, John Chaney, but you're killing each other on the court. How does that relationship look like off the court and then translate to what you do on the court as well?
That I always felt that coaching in the Big Five was what many of us have done growing up. You start by competing in your family, and even in a small way, maybe a silly way, you would compete your report card against your sister's report card, your brother's report card, and then you went out on the street, and the people that lived on your street, and you said, "Well, I'm better in stickball than that guy," and you build this thing all the way up, and to then get into the Big Five and have that opportunity where you're representing more than your school, because you know that there's an office building where they're going to have coffee the next day, and there's going to be a graduate of Villanova, and he's going to have a lot to say about the St. Joe game. Mm-hmm. And there's somebody from St. Joe's that's going to have a lot to say with the Temple game. It may not be Temple St. Joe's, it might be Temple Louisville, but they're going to have a comment, but they're going to be very parochial. They're going to be into their school. They're going to root for their school. And Rabbi, I don't know where you were at the time, but I can remember these great runs recently by Jay Wright, and people saying, well, should we root for them? Well, I'll raise my hand and say I rooted for them because Jay Wright was a camper on a camp team that I coached when he was in the 9th grade. So we've been friends for a long time. That was my friend.
Nice.
And I always believe this. I believe that the competition in the Big Five, you wanted to out-recruit, you wanted to out-coach, you wanted to win your game, you wanted to out-promote. Because as you well know, in Philadelphia, there's a pecking order. It's the Eagles first, it's the Eagles second, it's the Eagles third, and then it's the Phillies when they have it going, right? And so you're fighting to get your program and your school noticed in a pro town. And so I would always say that. Like I always wanted to be the guy that was known that I had the best camps. Right. Or I recruited the best in the public league. Even my TV show, I wanted to have a TV show that was different. I wanted to be I wanted to be the go-to guy if somebody needed a speaker. And saying all that, when you would fight and you would scratch and you would claw with each other, when the time came and the community needed us, we were bound on that. So you were mentioned Coaches versus Cancer, but there were a lot of initiatives. When it was what was best for the city and what was best for basketball in the city. The coaches we were locked together.
Yeah, it's not just the city of Philadelphia, but as I mentioned before, I was at the roast when you came up to Rochester to roast Boeheim, and it's funny, last week Boeheim said, well, we're the only show in town here, right? In Philly, as you just said, it's Eagles, 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 some Phillies, and maybe some Sixers, and then all of a sudden the rest of you, and now you're at Michigan, right? A small school in a big pond, and now Michigan, a big school in a small pond. Where I believe you were quoted that said, a 40-person staff meeting now turned into a 400-person. What's that like now in Michigan with Coach Howard coming back and really being that that big fish in a smaller city, if you wish, but being the only show in town. How's that transition been for you?
I have to answer this. I don't know how the transition's been. And I only say that because I went in June of 19.
Mm-hmm.
And on March 1, we were shut down.
Right.
And basically it was like, okay, go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was home for 4 months. And then we came back and no fans.
Right.
Nobody coming into practice. Really, Rabbi, nowhere to go at night. Like, I honestly believed that coach your team, recruit your future teams, but be a face and a voice for your university were the three prongs of the job. So it was very rare that I would go home after. I'm not talking about hanging out, but I would stop, and if somebody thought I could help visit at a hospital, I wanted to do that. If I could stop at a school and watch a practice, or if I could stop at a school and talk to the PTA, whatever it was that I could lift up the community. So my first experience in Michigan was, that's it. Practice is over. I'm going to make a couple recruiting calls and I'm going to go home.
Mm-hmm.
My family stayed in Philadelphia.
Right.
And I went home, and I'm not a TV watcher. I love the newspapers. I get the Philadelphia newspapers delivered.
I saw that.
A few weeks after the fact. And I was really hoping that this year, if it was a normal year, that I would get out and about and be in the community. Mm-hmm. So now with all things being equal, we're hoping that we have some normal behaviors. I'm hoping that I can get involved in the community, because I consider it, to have these jobs, to be able to coach basketball mm-hmm. is a blessing. But to have the opportunity to give back and touch one person is, I believe it's in the job description. And I don't think enough coaches read the job description closely as they should.
No, I absolutely love that. And I want to go actually to the topic of mental health for a moment. I found a video when one of your former players, Delonte West, who obviously was just part of that team with Jameer Nelson, 7 years in the NBA, he fell into a hole of mental health, depression, and literally on the streets. I'm going to just play this video for a moment and chat about how you reached out to help him.
A video of the former Cleveland Cavalier went viral earlier this week of him being attacked, yelling incoherently, and being handcuffed in Washington, D.C. Both his former coach Phil Martelli and teammate Jameer Nelson have reached out to Delonte with support. Jameer says he's been in contact with Delonte recently, and the video made him sick to his stomach. He tweeted out support and asked people for understanding. Coach Martelli reposted the tweet and shared his own thoughts. He said there are people from his basketball network reaching out to help Delonte get the help he needs. Delonte's agent confirmed the video was of him and that he's recovering from the attack.
When something like that happens at the top of the game in basketball, and then you see something like that happen to one of your players, when you reach out, what do you do? And how do you begin to bring somebody back like that?
Still tough. Every player that I've ever recruited, I asked them to join me and to be a partner, but I would be with them for life. And I wanted to be there to celebrate their highest of highs, a new job, a wedding, the birth of a child. But I also wanted them to know, and I mean this today as much as I've meant it to any player that I've talked to, I want to be there in those hard times. Mm-hmm. I want to be there, the loss of a job, the loss of possessions, the loss of a loved one. And so when all of this has transpired with Delonte, I haven't gone back on my word. And I'm not looking to be applauded for that.
Right.
But it's what I asked you to agree to. So just tell me. And I think the hardest thing with mental health in Delonte's case, or was ever, I don't know the answers. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any magic words. And I speaking for Jameer in the same way, like, we didn't have a pocket full of money that could change everything.
Right.
But it sounds simplistic, but basically Delonte knows we haven't changed our phone numbers.
Love it.
We haven't changed our hearts.
Mhm.
And Rabbi, this mental health and all that these young guys, prior to the pandemic, all the adulation and all the attention and all the social media rumors that they deal with, I think it's really daunting, not just for a basketball player, but for a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
So look, we stand with him. We stand with them, and I don't want to get into a whole lot of it.
No.
It is personal, but you jump on board. So we're on
Beautiful.
the ride
Beautiful.
with him, and the phone's always on.
Love it. No, absolutely. So I want to talk about a little bit about faith and being at St. Joe's, the Catholic University, right? You have a priest on the bench, good friend of yours, Joe Lenardi, was on a couple of weeks ago, and he said, ask coach this question. He said, one time there was a priest that received a technical foul based on maybe some language, and the ref couldn't call it on the priest, so they called it on the trainer. What was that all about?
Well, look, I believe that everybody is in. Everybody is in. So there's no one working for me. So obviously there was not a priest working for me to get the message above, like, hey, we need some help in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The trainer doesn't work for me. The strength and conditioning people work with you.
Yes.
And we had a situation where referee was a bit of a rabbit ear kind of guy, and he wasn't going to take it. And I added to the guys like kind of angst with our bench, and I'll never forget, he looked over and he gave the technical foul, and he pointed at the trainer, who never said a word, never said a word to the referees. But I thought later, you know what? He just he couldn't do it. He didn't want that mark against him later in life to say, you're the guy that gave a technical foul to a priest.
So what was the priest role in a university like St. Joe's? What is the faith aspect between either the priest and the coach, the priest and the players and the coach? What does that all look like when you have a religious figure within a sports community?
Well, I think it indicated to people that we were a Catholic institution, that we were a Jesuit institution. And I can only tell you that the priests that I had, they were confidants.
Nice.
There are often times, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, there are often times when assistant coaches are in there, they have a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only share this with you. My routine was, I don't like warm-ups in basketball. I don't like going out there because I think sometimes players are warming up for the people to watch them rather than to really prepare for a game. So I would sit in the locker room, and the only person that sat in there with me was our chaplain.
Oh, wow.
And we might talk about things that were going on in the world. We might talk about we might talk about the setting that we were in. Hey, the VCU, the Siegel Center, but we wouldn't talk about the game. It wasn't, hey, do you think we should play zone tonight? It was.
Boeheim doesn't ask that question.
kind of just to relieve the tension that I would have. And the priest that I had for my children's weddings, all three of them have been on the altar. So they were more than just part of the program. They were really part of my family. but I relied on them. I really did. I relied on them. And you mentioned Joe Lunardi. There were times when Joe Lunardi would take that role, and it was just to have a conversation, to take that edge that all of us feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I don't want this to be an average podcast. I want this to be great.
Right.
I don't want this to be an average game. I want this to be great.
Right.
So it meant a great deal to me. And all of them were friends before they were work associates.
And now switch over to University of Michigan, where it's a public university. Are there aspects of faith that you see within that program, not perhaps as visible as a priest on the bench as part of the family? What does that look like? And if not, do you think that piece is perhaps sometimes missing in larger public programs?
Well, I don't know about all larger public programs, but I've always thought this. If when I was coaching, when I was interacting with people, I wasn't trying to convert them to Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't trying to convert them into, follow my thinking in the religious world. What I was hoping to be was an example. And that's the same thing at Michigan. I just want to be an example of, if somebody wants to label it as a good person, as a caring person, then that's what I wanted for all of our players, our managers, our support staff. And I think that Michigan and St. Joseph's are similar in this ways. It's always something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
Something bigger than a game. And it's something bigger than your program. There's always something going on. And if I could just divert for a second, that's why I was so proud of college basketball in September, October, and November.
Mm-hmm.
The drive to get kids registered to vote,
Nice.
however they were going to vote. That was in a way a faith experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had to become knowledgeable, they had to become aware, they had to become active. Isn't that what we all want in our faith?
Love it.
Knowledgeable, aware, and active. That makes for, you know what, just this much, a little bit better person.
Absolutely. No, it's wonderful to see that. And sports, as you said, social media being sometimes a detriment, but in this case, sports really being a time where they can help each other as well. You spoke about when you go to a university, really with St. Joe's, that you said it wasn't just basketball, it was the family way. You have a little guy, a grandson that loves basketball as well. So let's see if this video works, and we'll talk about this little guy.
Martelli, 19 years as the head coach. On the left, look at him with his arms folded. His grandchild, 4-year-old Philip Stephen Martelli. He imitates his granddad. He's even got his grease board, and he's 4 years old. He's dressed in a coat and tie. Okay, my work is done. I think he's got.
Tell us about him and that connection and that love for you, the love for basketball, and as you keep saying, right, it's a family way.
It's well, he's 11. He lives in Cranston, Rhode Island. And he has put away his grease board and put away his pen and put away his clothes, and now he's a player.
Nice.
And ironically, my wife and I are going there this weekend. His sister, who is 7, is receiving her first communion.
Oh, so beautiful.
He has an AAU game at 8:00 Saturday morning and 7:30 Sunday morning. And I said to him, if your parents are going to be okay with it, I'll go to the game, and then we'll go to church, and then Sunday we'll do the same thing. We'll go to the game in the morning and then go to church. And that was his DNA. His father is an assistant coach at Bryant University. His uncle is an assistant coach at Post College in Connecticut. His uncle, my son, is assistant coach at VCU. His grandfather is a legendary high school coach in Connecticut. His mother played for a Division III basketball championship at Eastern Connecticut.
Wow.
His grandmother, my wife, her team's from Immaculata College. They're in the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yep.
It goes on and on and on. And I didn't even know a lot of that was going on. Like the first time we went through it, I didn't know that he got dressed like that. And I have a routine on game day. I lay my clothes out. I say my prayers. I do all these things. And he would watch. And I didn't know this, but when he would come home from preschool, he would be doing the same things on those particular days. And look, coaches take themselves way too serious, right? Like we all.
Not you though. That's what I love about what you do. I've seen you in person, the humor. I love it, and I think it's such a wonderful model for sports and for you. And it's we got to do it more that way.
Yeah. So I appreciate that, and look, I take what I do serious, but I don't take myself serious. And to have that joy, and I can remember that bus ride coming home, and we had won an Atlantic 10 championship, and somebody said to me, hey, your grandson was the star of the show. And I'm like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. And they described to me the scene, and his father at Delaware had won a championship. He had been at that championship earlier in the week, but now he's spending time. And look, I think in whatever we do, if we can touch children, but we can also learn from children, like the pure joy that he got from being around. I felt the same way at my camps, Rabbi. Like I wanted those kids to have joy about the game. I wanted them to have the joy of being together. And I wanted them to say, you know what, this isn't a guy that we have to put up on some pedestal and be unapproachable. And,
right. No, I think that's really, really crucial, both in the faith and the sports aspect. I mean, going through this process of, starting this type of video podcast and reaching out to people, not in my profession, but a world that I do love. If I wasn't doing this, I'd probably do something in that world. And the ability for people to say, yes, I want to speak about what I do in a serious way, but also make a difference as well. I want to go to Coaches versus Cancer for a moment, and speaking about specifically the suits and sneakers that you said that you got involved. I just quote you, as an egotistical way to basically be the first on the map. But you said after that, you met kids, families, business associates, and more. And you used these two words very, very seriously. I want to crush cancer. Just want to watch this video for a second, and we'll talk about Coaches versus Cancer.
Hi, I'm Phil Martelli from St. Joseph's University Hawks. Coaches versus Cancer to me is an opportunity to give back to a community, a basketball community, and the Philadelphia community in general that has given so much to my family and I. What I would like to take from Coaches versus Cancer is all the courage, all the heroes, not just those who have battled, but their families, their friends, their business associates. We haven't done enough until we can read our newspapers and the words cancer-free are the headline. We have to crush cancer. Cancer takes no days off and is not discriminatory in any way, shape, or form. So to be involved in Coaches versus Cancer is an honor, but it's a responsibility.
So I spent many summers actually with my brother and family at CHOP, and I've been on those boards that you and your players have been, and that's the job, it's to crush cancer. Take us through what that has meant to you. 12 years at the helm of the NABC and Coaches versus Cancer, doing that important work. What's that been like, and how's it made a difference?
I go back to this idea, like coach, recruit, but what are you doing? What are you really doing to make a difference? And so when we started in Philadelphia, we came from nowhere. We had not one of the 6 schools in Philadelphia were raising any money at all in the 3-point challenge. And when I got engaged, and that's the reason I used the egotistical thing. Like I got involved in it, and I was saying like, well, how could Jim Boeheim in Syracuse raise all this money? Not thinking about impact all these lives, I was thinking about raising this money and making sure that Philadelphia basketball got on that top line.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got into it, and we ran a golf tournament, and we had a breakfast on the day after Selection Sunday, and our wives created a gala, and then we looked around and said, "What else can you do?" Well, you know what, Rabbi, there's 800 high schools in a circle around Philadelphia. How do we go to those young kids? And then how do they go to their junior high kids just to make a difference? And it's not about raising $1 million or writing a check for $100,000. It's $1. It's selling a pencil at lunchtime, and putting that. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to make the quality of life for one family, for one patient, for one business associate, just have a quality of life that's a little bit better for one day. And then and then we can go to the next day. And then we could go to the next family. But and I mean this, and I've heard people, and you've heard them, right? They make these great testimonies about, I beat cancer. Yeah, but that's not enough. It's not, and I'm not knocking anybody. Yeah, but we have to crush it. Cancer is straight up a bully, right? It's the bully in every schoolyard all over this country, and it's been around forever. So how do you beat a bully? You walk up to the bully, punch it right in the square in its head, and then what does a bully do? It runs. So it sounds simplistic, but that's why I'm into crushing cancer, and when it happens, it's going to be because of all those families that I've met. And
so actually, I run a basketball camp here, so called Sinai Temple Basketball Camp. We have about 100 kids. Right now we're at 50 because of capacity. Last week we sold out our registration in 10 minutes, but each we call it high-level basketball, high-level values. And publicly, I'm going to say right now, our project is going to be this summer, Coaches versus Cancer, and we look forward to contributing that dollar, that pencil, that quality of life to Coaches versus Cancer and getting the word out here in LA as well. So that's important to us.
It's beautiful.
I want to go to the NABC. You just won an award, the Guardians of the Game. And I quote, "Phil is the real deal. He cares deeply for people, especially student athletes and coaches, very passionate about the game." And as part of that bio, you were head of the NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Ethics Coalition, right? There's a lot about college basketball and sports and corruption and everything like that. What comes to you as the head of the Ethics Coalition, and how do you improve the game and the college lifestyle and the quality of life through that role as well?
Well, one of the things that has grown over time, and it's a positive, is that the relationship between the NCAA and the NABC has been fostered, has been groomed, that we are in this together. That wasn't the way when I started in this game 30 years ago. It was the coaches are over here doing their thing, and the NCAA is over here, and now we're here in the goal of, yes, the game, because the game is about these student athletes, but also coaches. I mean, and many times the NABC has taken off on these ideas of the guardians of the game, and that's what that award became, the guardians of the game. And no matter whether you're coaching at the synagogue or you're coaching at the Final Four, if you're coaching in a high school, if you're coaching in a rec league, you're not coaching first. You're teaching first.
Love it. Yeah.
And I think that if we can get coaches at all levels to come together as teachers of the game. What game? The game of life. The game of basketball. And if it's a baseball, then you're teaching baseball. But first and foremost, you're teaching the game of life. And like, there have been earlier in my career, very early in my career, there were a lot of times where you think, why is there friction with this coaching staff and that coaching staff, and people making, false accusations behind closed doors? And so one of the goals of the NABC and the Ethics Coalition and combining with the NCAA was let's take this profession and be teachers, and let's hold each other to a high standard, but also allow others to look at us and say, you know what, I'm comfortable with how they're doing things. And where we are today doesn't compare to where we were when I started this game.
Yes.
And Jim Boeheim was one of the people that I approached and said, you know what, I'd like to get involved at a higher level in terms of the profession. And that has been a real plus in my career, to be a part of growing the profession and growing the respect for the profession.
So I have a mundane question from a good friend of ours, Sammy Lawrence at University of Michigan. Coach, do you have an order at Zingerman's?
Don't tell anybody, but I've only had Zingerman's twice, and their roast turkey was unbelievable. And we have a young lady who was our head manager. She's graduating Saturday, and even though I'm in Philadelphia, she invited me to her socially distanced graduation party. It's being catered by Zingerman, so I'm going to miss that. But I might ask her to just. There has to be a way for them to send me a sandwich here in Philadelphia.
Well, that's funny that you say that, because I'm coming to Philly next week, and the first stop is at Famous and 4th Street for a lox and bagel. So I totally hear you. A couple more questions from our audience here. What did you learn most from Coach Chaney?
That in this game, you can get caught up in what people say about you. Great coach, Hall of Fame coach, in his case, not mine. But I was so enamored and so thankful to watch John Chaney turn around. He looked around for the next man, and he extended his hand. And whether it was the guy selling pretzels outside the Palestra, whether it was the security guard at the Liacouras Center, John had a way of making sure that not the downtrodden, but the person out of the spotlight, that they had a moment in time to have the spotlight shined on him. Just an extraordinary guy. And like what people saw on the sideline in terms of the passion, that's the way he lived every minute of his life. He was passionate about shopping. And so I think with John Chaney, it would be don't let your light dim.
Oh, I love that. Don't let your light dim, Coach John Chaney. Wow. Well, that, in fact, actually, we have Sonny Spira, former Syracuse alumni. Love Coach Martelli. Heard him at many coaches' clinics. Tons of knowledge and great style. I think what you said, in fact, is exactly what we do here on this podcast as we conclude today. When you said to learn and to teach. Every single day before we say the declaration of our faith, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, we say these two words in Hebrew, Lilmod ulilamed, that our job is to learn and to teach. Wow. Coach, that's exactly what you do at St. Joe's University of Michigan. More importantly, off the court, for the amazing, as you said, affecting the quality of children's life and adults' life, one life at a time, one moment at a time. We want to give a big shout out to Coach Martelli, but most importantly to Alan Fogel, our good friend who has connected us. Coach, when you're out in LA, we hope you visit us at Sinai Temple. And I hope to see you at the pretzel shop next week when I get to see my parents for the first time in over a year in Philadelphia as well. Coach, it's wonderful to have you. Good luck, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Everybody out there, stay safe.
שמור נא עלינו כמו ילדים, שמור נא ואל תעזוב, תן לנו אור בשמחת נעורים, תן לנו גם לאהוב.
1, 2, 3, 4.
הוא היוצא מרושע ברומים, הוא הרופא כל חולים, הוא הנותן רוב שמחה לילדים, הוא העושה משפטים. הוא בשמיים והוא היקיר, הוא הגדול הנורא, הוא אלוהינו מצרים. אלוהי שמור עלינו כמו ילדים, שמור עלינו תעזור, תן לנו אור לשמחת נעורים, תן לנו כוח בלעוד, שמור עלינו כמו ילדים, שמור עלינו תעזור, תן לנו אור בשמחת נעורים, תן לנו גם לאהוב. מה קרה לנו עוד בימים, מה קרה כל היום, שמש תקווה והמון מוותים, לילה ויום שחלום. הוא בשמיים והוא היחיד, הוא הגדול הנורא, הוא השומר